talking about protecting someone who can't take care of themselves. Specifically protecting people with disabilities and making sure that we have a plan put together that they're taken care of if the need ever arises. So a little bit about our firm. We've helped over 6,000 families protect the assets they leave behind from divorce, creditors, and lawsuits. We've also helped over 900 families implement the plans that we've designed, and over 2,400 families implement the plans that other attorneys have designed. And the reason why that's significant to you is most estate planning is kind of depressing, so you're going to want to put together a plan, put it on the shelf, and forget about it. But what's important to you is it actually protects your family if something happens to you. Our firm is kind of unique in that we do both estate planning and elder law. So estate planning is the who gets your stuff when you die, making sure that your loved ones are protected if something happens to you. Elder law covers the areas of protecting somebody who can't take care of themselves. So things like special needs trusts, supplemental needs trusts. It also talks about protecting assets for government benefits, and that's a portion of what we're going to be talking about today. Other thing that's unique about our firm is that you get the experience of not only the attorneys in our office, but you also get the experience of other attorneys nationwide. And that's extremely significant in some of the things we're going to be talking about today, because a lot of the benefit programs that people are entitled to, the money comes from the federal government. It's administered on a state level, and every state administers it differently. And so because of that, there's some differences as you move state to state, and there's also, you can see trends with changes. So for instance, if there's a major change in how a benefit plan is administered, it usually will be implemented in states other than Texas before it finally comes to Texas. Let me give you an example. So with Medicaid for gifting now has a 5-year look back. So if you've given away assets 5 years before applying to Medicaid, it counts against you. It used to be a 3-year look back, and that look back actually changed in 40 states before it finally changed in Texas. So a lot of times being able to see nationwide what's going on with Medicaid programs or SSI, we can see trends, and we're able to predict that and make sure that our documents do the best that they can as far as putting things together. I think I'm going to talk to you a little bit later, but I'm going to mention it right now, is when we're drafting a special needs trust or a supplemental needs trust for a beneficiary with a disability. And by the way, those two things are the same thing. So with a supplemental needs trust or a special needs trust, it can be drafted in a way that the beneficiary is able to use the money for absolutely anything they need. But if you have an attorney prepare one that's not experienced in preparing one, they may draft it too narrowly. So they may draft it where it only covers what the government doesn't cover. So for example, with a supplemental needs trust, one of the things that we can do to customize it, to make it where it's better for your beneficiary, is to make the language broad enough that it can cover anything they need, and it can even add on to or improve the things the government will pay for. So let me give you an example. If the government is paying for housing, it may be paying for a semi-private room with a roommate. And if the trust is worded properly, you could have the trust or the trustee be able to pay for that person to have a private room. So they have a better quality of life if the trust is drafted with a lot more flexibility. We have 3 locations that we can meet with you with. We can meet with you here in Denton, we can meet with you in Aubrey, or we can meet with you in Bartonville. I've got 4 books that you might be interested in. One of them is Who Gets Your Stuff When You Die. That's my most popular book. It has a chapter on special needs, and that would be one that would be good to look at. The other 2 books are Would Your Spouse Know What to Do If Something Happens to You, or Would Your Family Know What to Do If Something Happens to You? It has a lot of very helpful checklists. And then the last book is Finding Strength in the Face of Alzheimer's, and taking care of someone, just the toll that that can take on you. So today we're going to be talking about planning for those who can't take care of themselves. So this is for you if you have a family member who could not take care of themselves if something happened to you. So who will take care of your loved one if something happens? So there's 2 different roles to be looking at. One is the role of caregiver. So if that's the person that would deal with housing needs, medical needs, make sure that the person's safe, those kind of things. The other role is the financial role. So who would be managing money? So a lot of times these are 2 different people. So you may pick somebody who's very compassionate, would be very good with your loved one, but they may not be good with money. And the person that's good with money may not be all that compassionate. So it's a way to divide the roles so that they're able to both these people are able to work together. Other thing is the person you've got that's doing the financial part, it's a complicated role because there's a lot of government benefits that your loved one may qualify for, and there's a lot of requirements and paperwork that has to be done associated with that. So the person you put in the financial role should be somebody who's familiar with government benefits and understands how to go through the process. So the next question is, will they know your loved one's preferences? So thinking through, are there certain foods they like? Are there certain foods they don't like? Are there certain routines they have? Is it important that you maintain the routine, or are they okay with varying from the routine? And what I recommend is you come up with a list or instructions related to this, and you revisit it every once in a while. Because if you think about it, we all kind of change our favorite food over time or things we like. And so if it's updated, it's going to be more current regarding the person. But let me give you an example of a situation where an instruction letter would have been really nice to have had. So in this situation, this guy's brother was in an assisted living facility. He had been in a car wreck. He was unable to communicate. And he got a call from the facility, and they said they were having a really hard time getting him to go to bed. And so they wanted him to come, the brother to come, and just see what they were doing and see if there was some way to make the bedtime routine easier. So he walks in, and they changed his brother into flannel pajamas. They put him under the covers. They tucked him in really tight, and then turned off the light and left, and then he would become combative. And he said, "Oh, I understand." He said, "I can tell you exactly what's going on. My brother, his entire life, has slept in gym shorts. He sleeps on top of the covers. He likes to have a fan blowing on him, and he likes to have music playing, and he likes to have some sort of nightlight so that the room isn't completely dark." So when they switched to doing what this guy wanted, he went to bed easily every night. But if you think about it, we all have preferences like that, and if we're unable to communicate, how is somebody going to know what to do? Other thing to think about is if you're trying to get them to do something that they don't want to do, what incentives work? So what things could you do? There's a lot of people that love ice cream. So if you say, if we do this, then afterwards we can go get ice cream or something like that, it might make it where it's easier to make that transition. Also thinking through types of music they like, shows they like to watch, movies they like to watch, just preferences along the way make a huge difference. You of course need to make a list of other things like what medicines they're taking. So in planning, as far as the documents, as far as putting together a plan for your loved one, there's several planning arrangements that we don't recommend. So let me walk through the ones that are not a good idea and tell you why. The first is outright distributions. So outright distributions have several disadvantages. One, the beneficiary may not have the ability to manage the money, and somebody might take advantage of them. Two, if they're on any needs-based government benefits and you give them more than $2,000, that can actually disqualify them from the benefits. So we've got to be careful. If you give them money outright, you could actually disqualify them from a benefit. And if they're on Medicaid and that's what's providing their health insurance, that may be the only way that they can get health insurance. So you don't want to accidentally disqualify them for that. Second thing we don't recommend is leaving it in a non-qualifying trust. So what I mean by a non-qualifying trust is one that's not designed to protect for government benefits, meaning not a special needs trust or a supplemental needs trust. That trust will protect them from making bad decisions. It can allow somebody else to be in charge, but the disadvantage is it doesn't protect those benefits. The third option we don't recommend is disinheritance. So occasionally I'll have somebody say, my loved one is living in a group home. The government is providing for everything they need, and they don't need any money from me. And so for that reason, I'm going to totally disinherit them because they're already taken care of. But how do you know that things won't change? So what if the government no longer provides those needs? And if the government no longer provides those needs, there should be funds available to take care of them. Also, a lot of times there's things that would make their life better if you were able to have a fund that's available to do that. Let me give you an example of that. So one of our clients, her sister was in a group home here in town. Her sister was older. She was in her, I think she was in her 70s. And she, at this point, was no longer able to participate in doing the chores around the home. And so one of the premises of the home is that everyone in the home did their share of the chores. And because she had a supplemental needs trust, the ability to have funds to help, the sister was able to actually pay for some things for the other residents, like taking them to movies, buying a grill that they had outside. And so then that way the other residents were not as resentful of the fact that the sister wasn't doing her share of the chores. So it may be a matter of that there's some things, even if all their needs are provided, you could still add on some entertainment things or some quality of life things for that person with that extra money. The last one is actually a very frequent one, and it's one that I usually try to talk people out of. It's leaving the assets to a sibling and assuming that the sibling is going to take care of the one with a disability. Now, a good portion of the time that's a valid assumption that your child that doesn't have a disability will care for their sibling, cares for their sibling, wants to take care of them. But it doesn't cover all the things that could go wrong. So if the one you've left the money to passes away, would the people they leave money to, would they take care of your child with a disability? And you've got to keep going. So if something happens to the next generation, what happens? So for instance, if you leave it to your son to take care of your son with a disability, if he passes away, the first question is, will his wife take care of your son that needs care? And then the next question is, would their children take care of him? And you keep just kind of going down the line to make sure that everybody down the line would do it. The safer thing to do would be to leave it in a trust so it's clear that the money's available for that one with a disability. The other risk is the person that you left the money to take care of them. If that person gets in a lawsuit or gets divorced, that money is vulnerable to being taken away from even from them. And then they wouldn't have the money available to take care of the one with a disability. So what we recommend is called a third-party supplemental needs trust. And I told you a minute ago, special needs trust and supplemental needs trust, exact same thing, just two different titles. I like supplemental needs trust better because it supplements what the government's willing to pay. There are two types of special needs trust or supplemental needs trust. There's a first party or a third party. So first party is when the person with the disability uses their own money to create a trust, or if they were like in a car accident and got a judgment in a court, that money belongs to the person with the disability. Those are first party special needs trusts, and those the government is required to be paid back with whatever's left when they pass away. So the money can be used for anything they need during their lifetime, but at the point where they pass away, government gets reimbursed. Third party means it's created by somebody other than the person with a disability. The money is available for the person with a disability, and because it came from somebody other than the person with a disability, the government doesn't have to be paid back when they pass away. So that third party is what we recommend. There's some attorneys out there that don't do a lot of special needs planning, and they actually don't understand the difference between a third party and a first party, which means in a situation where somebody is putting money into a trust for the benefit of the person with a disability, they make the mistake of putting in a clause that the government gets paid back when they pass away. And that would actually require that money to go to the government when it's actually not required under the law. So you've got to make sure you're working with somebody who knows what they're doing as far as putting it together. Other important thing is that you've got to make sure that the language complies with what's going on law-wise. So one of the big changes recently is you used to be able to pay for travel out of this supplemental needs trust, and it could be any travel. But then there were people that took advantage of it. So there were people that would actually take 50 people on an Alaskan cruise along with the person with a disability out of the trust to keep the money from going to the government when the person passed away. So now the regulations say that you can take the person with a disability, can have one paid caregiver go with them, and it can be a family member. But we've got to make sure that the language in the trust doesn't accidentally allow them to have more than that one person, because that actually will disqualify the trust from being protected assets. Other thing is we got to make sure it's designed to provide for whatever the beneficiary needs. So let me give you another example, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get into detail on SSI. So if the beneficiary is on SSI, SSI is designed to cover housing. And if you end up paying for housing out of the supplemental needs trust or directly for that beneficiary, it actually reduces the SSI by up to a third. But there's a lot of times that it's worth having the SSI reduced by that third for quality of life for the beneficiary. Because right now, the SSI amount's around $900. And a lot of places, you're not going to be able to get quality housing for the person for $900. So if you need to pay more than that for them to have quality housing, the trade-off is you get a little less than SSI, but you've got a better quality of life for that beneficiary. So that's another thing that we design in our supplemental needs trust to make sure that that's able to be done. If it's not worded properly, then the trustee would not have the authority to pay for that additional housing. Let me talk to you a little bit about ABLE accounts. So ABLE accounts are relatively new. And one of the benefits of an ABLE account, so an ABLE account is an account that's actually designed to allow the beneficiary to have more than the $2,000 in their name, because most of these needs-based government benefits require that they have less than $2,000 in their name. But if the beneficiary is able to work, the ABLE account allows them to put aside money. If they are able to handle the money, if they have the ability to handle money wisely, you can actually have them have access to the account. So they could have a debit card out off of it, or they would have the ability to access money in it. And if not, you can have somebody else access it on their behalf. But if they're earning money and they want to have a certain amount of savings, they can put it into this ABLE account. So a little bit about the eligibility requirements. They just changed it this year. It used to be that you had to be disabled prior to the age of 26. So whatever your disability was, it had to have started prior to the age of 26. They've now moved it to 46. So the disability the onset of it has to be prior to 46. And when I say disability, you have to meet the Social Security definition of disability, which means unable to be gainfully employed. You can self-certify the disability, but you still need a doctor's note saying that you have the disability. But if you're not someone who's already on SSI or SSDI or some sort of other disability payment, you can submit an affidavit saying that you have the disability that you support with a doctor's letter, and that will qualify as having a disability. So the mechanics of the account, as of this year, 2026, you can put $20,000 per year in it. If you have a 529 plan, a college savings plan, you can actually roll that over into the ABLE account. So another contribution you can make is you can make another contribution that's a little more than $15,000 a year if the beneficiary is employed and they're not participating in the employer's retirement plan. They can contribute another $15,560 into the account during that year. So that's a way to even get a little bit more money into the ABLE account. Now, ABLE account, one of the mechanics of it is when the beneficiary passes away, the government is reimbursed out of whatever's left. So that's one of the downsides to an ABLE account. So you're not going to want to overfund it, but it is a good way to have the beneficiary have access to money, have a little bit more savings along the way. Also, so the account itself, if you're on SSI, you're allowed to have $100,000 in it. So the maximum you can have in it to have it not mess up your SSI benefits is $100,000. Oh, and the other important thing is that the beneficiary can only have one account. So if you have two sets of grandparents that want to set up an ABLE account for a beneficiary, there can only be one account. So it's not, you can do $20,000 per person putting it in, it's $20,000 per beneficiary. So in spending the money, it can be spent on a wide variety of things. And actually, it probably would be easier to tell you what it can't be spent on. But let me go through a list of things that it can be spent on. It can be spent on housing, education, medical expenses, transportation, employment, assistive technology, legal fees, funeral, burial, basic living expenses, and anything else that's approved by the government. So pretty broad as far as what it can be spent on. The things it wouldn't cover are things like giving away money. So you can't take the money in the ABLE account and have them give it away to other friends or family. It's got to be used for the benefit of the person with the disability. And as I've already mentioned, the distribution on death, when somebody passes away, it actually does reimburse the government for whatever they've paid. But if the government has only given them a small amount of benefits, that's all that gets reimbursed. And if there's money left over after the government's reimbursed, it can go to whoever the beneficiary wants it to go to, or whoever the person setting up the account wants it to go to. Okay, so real quick, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about comparing the ABLE account with third-party special needs trust. So one of the things that we'll talk about with SSI, if you pay for housing directly or even indirectly, it actually reduces that SSI benefit. But one of the things that we can do strategy-wise now is we can actually take it whether you're paying the housing for the person directly or the supplemental needs trust is paying the housing for the person, instead of paying it directly, you actually put the money into the ABLE account and then the ABLE account pays for the housing, and then that doesn't reduce the SSI. So let me talk to you about the importance of public benefits. There's two types of public benefit programs. There's ones that are needs-based. Those are things like SSI or Medicaid. They're entitlement benefits. So needs-based means they look at your assets, they look at your income, and they see if you qualify for it. Entitlement means you get them regardless of how much money you have or income you have. So the entitlement ones are things like SSDI or CDB or Medicare, and I'll talk to you in more detail about all of these. So SSI, your eligibility, you have to be a person with a disability. The disability is based on the Social Security definition, meaning you're unable to be gainfully employed. And it has a resource test. That resource test is measured on midnight of the first day of the month. So they look at what assets you have on midnight of the first day of the month. There are certain assets that are exempt. You're allowed to have $2,000 is the maximum amount of cash you're allowed to have. And then I'll go through a few of the other requirements in a minute. And then there's an income test. So they look at the income and they look at the total income you receive for the month. Now I'm going to go over income in a minute. Income for SSI is a very odd definition. It includes things like gifts, but we'll go over that in just a second. So as of 2026, the monthly benefit for SSI is $994 a month for an individual. So childhood disability benefits. So this is a situation where the disability has to have begun prior to the age of 22. You must be over 18 when you're actually claiming it. You can't be married. Your parent has to already be receiving Social Security or they have to have passed away. It's based on the parent's work history. You get 75% of what the parent would receive from Social Security. If they're deceased, and if they're not deceased but they're on Social Security, it's 50%. So eligibility for Medicaid. So we talked about SSI being reduced for housing. The reason why we want to make sure that we get at least $1 of SSI if the person qualifies is if you receive at least $1 of SSI, you automatically qualify for Medicaid. And Medicaid may be the only way that a person that is born with a disability is able to actually get health insurance. So we want to make sure that no matter what, we don't allow the SSI to drop down below $1. So the resource test for SSI, for countable resources, it's $2,000 for an individual, $3,000 for a couple, and it's measured on a month-to-month basis on the first day of the month, that midnight of the first day. So if you were to receive an inheritance of $10,000, as long as that money is spent by midnight of the first day of the next month, it will not be a problem as far as continuing your SSI benefits. So if you were to receive a large inheritance, we'd have to talk about maybe setting up a first-party special needs trust. It's one where you put the money in, can be used for anything you need, but whatever's left reimburses the government, but at least you stay on the SSI benefits. The big exempt assets are your house and a car. So those two things, house and car, are exempt. The ABLE account is exempt up to $100,000. So SSI income includes what you would expect, earned income. So if you work and you earn income, that's SSI income. Next category is unearned income. So unearned income is things like gifts or inheritances. In-kind support and maintenance. So in-kind support and maintenance, they've actually kind of changed the definition, but currently it only covers housing and housing-related expenses, which we'll go through in a minute. And then the fourth type of income is deemed income. So if you're under the age of 18, your parents' income is considered your income. So most people do not qualify for SSI until they turn 18 because their parents have enough income that they won't qualify. The other deemed income is if you're married, your spouse's income is considered your income. So as you can tell, the SSI income definition is a lot broader than the IRS definition of income. So there are actually exemptions from this income that's counted against you. There's actually 56 exemptions. I'm going to go over two of them, the two main ones that are used the most. The first one is you get an exemption of $65 of earned income. So if you earn income, $65, the first $65 is not counted. And then there's a $20 any income exemption. So any of those categories that I mentioned, the first $20 does not count against you. For earned income, so income you earn from a job, We first take off that $65 of earned income credit. Then we also take off the $20 of any income credit. And after that, for every $2 you earn, there's a $1 reduction in your SSI benefit. So for unearned income, it's actually a dollar for dollar reduction. So if you inherit money or money's given to you, it actually reduces your SSI by the amount you're given or you inherit. So in-kind maintenance support starting September 30th, 2024, it no longer covers food. So when I first started, in-kind maintenance support covered housing, food, and clothing. And then they took clothing out of the definition. And then in 2024, they took out food. So now it covers housing. Now housing is a lot broader than you would think. So housing isn't just the cost of rent or the house payments. It includes any of your utilities. And it also covers if you're living with someone and they're allowing you to live there for free. So if you have a child with a disability and they turn 18 and they qualify for SSI and they're still living in your house and you're not charging them rent to live there, their SSI will still be reduced by 1/3 of the benefit as a deemed rent in effect. Now, if you look at, and there's websites you can use to look this up, what someone would pay you to rent out a room in your place, that's the amount that you would charge in rent. And it may be less than 1/3 of the benefit, depending on what the rates are in your area. We've already talked about this, but I'm going to mention it again. One of the ways around getting the SSI reduced is having the money go into the ABLE account and having the ABLE account pay the rent. So you can save $3,976 a year by putting it into the ABLE account and having it pay. And that amount is calculated by taking 1/3 of the SSI per month and multiplying it by 12. And then let's talk a little bit about Social Security disability insurance. So SSDI is a situation where somebody has a work history. So they've been working for a period of time, they become disabled, and then the government actually calculates a benefit based on their work history. It's an average of what they've been paid over the period of time that they've worked, a certain number of quarters. So if they qualify for SSDI, you actually get more money most of the time than the amount you would get for SSI. So if somebody has a work history, a lot of times SSDI is a better choice. And it's also not needs-based, and so that means that we don't have to have under a certain number of assets or under a certain amount of income in order to qualify. You have to no longer be able to be gainfully employed. So the average payment in 2025 for SSDI was $1,581 a month. And like I said, it's based on your earning at record is how they determine that. So Medicare is a health insurance program for people over 65. They also allow you to get it for certain disabilities. So two of the ones that are common are either renal failure or ALS, but there are other ones. So Medicare is also not needs-based. It's what they call an entitlement program. You're entitled to it regardless of your assets and income. And then Medicaid, so switching back, Medicaid is actually needs-based. So Medicaid is a program that provides for health insurance for people that are unable to take care of themselves, but they've also got to meet certain asset and income requirements in order to qualify. So the resource limits for Medicaid, you can't have over $2,000 if you're a single person. You can have a home, one vehicle. You can prepay your funeral. It has to be non-refundable. And you can have life insurance with a face value, actually a cash value, of less than $1,500. So you look to see if you cashed in the policy, could you get more than $1,500? And if the answer is yes, then it's going to count against the $2,000 you're allowed to have. Next thing is waiver interest lists. So waiver interest lists, there's a lot of them. If you look in my book in the appendix, there's actually a long list of waiver interest lists. A lot of them are based on whatever disability you have. So there's some, the one I've got here is the deaf blind with multiple disabilities, but there's several others. But the top one that I have on this slide is the CLASS. CLASS is Community Living and Support Services, and really CLASS is designed to provide for housing. So it's a way to get group housing, and it actually has over an 18-year waiting list. So at the point where your loved one, you realize your loved one has a disability, it's worth getting them on the CLASS waiting list. And when they get to the top of it, if you don't want to move them into group housing, you just decline, and then you could actually get back on the list to wait again. But The hard thing is that you don't really know at the point where they're diagnosed with a disability whether group housing will be a good option in the future, and it's worth getting on the waiting list ahead of time. So where do you go from here? Most people end up procrastinating, but you have someone who's dependent upon you for care. And so we need to make sure that they're protected if something happens to you. So it's extremely important that you put together a plan that takes care of your loved one that would be unable to take care of themselves. We would love to meet with you to discuss how we can protect your loved one that has the disability. We look forward to working with you.